I hope the light is nice today. It seems like it is. Okay. I'm not going to be filming in this location very much longer. Whew. I did find a new space, but I'm still playing with the light there. It's, well, I haven't spent a whole lot of time there yet, so I haven't had a chance to really work it out. Oh. Ready? Sutra 30, Section 2, Sādhanā Pāda. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacaryāparigrahā, Yama. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacaryāparigrahā, Yama. Non-violence, harmlessness, truthfulness, honesty, non-misappropriativeness, sexual continence, and non-possessiveness, non-acquisitiveness are self-restraints, vows of abstention. Vows of self-restraint compromise abstention from violence, falsehood, theft, incontinence, and acquisitiveness, taking things, right, as your own. Which, ultimately, whoa, that's a lot. As you get refined, more and more refined, that activity of taking things as your own, projecting out and identifying with, can get highly refined, and it's very, very subtle to shift that. Yama and Niyama, the first two angas of yoga, are meant to provide an adequate moral foundation for the yogic training. The very fact that they are placed before the other angas shows their basic character. Before dealing with the moral qualities and general mode of life which are implied in Yama and Niyama, it is necessary to explain a few things about the place of morality in the yogic life. Incredible as it may sound, morality of a high order is not always necessary for the practice of yoga. There are two kinds of yoga, lower and higher. The lower has for its object the development of certain psychic faculties and supernormal powers, and for this the transcendent morality implied in Yama Niyama is not at all necessary. In fact, it acts as a hindrance because it causes inner conflict and prevents the yogi from going ahead with his pursuit of personal power and ambitions. Okay? So this is one of the processes of detaching from the physical reality that we have created here, which is bound by perception. It's so interesting. And so everything has already been impressed upon your consciousness, everything that you're going to learn in this physical reality. And if you prevent yourself from projecting that out by judging it, criticizing it, and suppressing it, you're not going to live out those lessons. Whoa, what did I just say? In clearing all that stuff out, there's a certain degree of seeing it projected so that you can understand it that has to occur. Wow, that is intense. Take a moment with that. So there's permission there, right? Yikes. This is the realm of dangerous illusions. Wow. So once you start to become aware of that, and your awareness is, and your interpretation, your perception, and your consciousness of it, like, whoa, okay, I see what's happening here, starts to become more and more refined, that line starts to shift, right? It becomes more and more obvious, like, whoa, I just stepped over the line. Okay, yep. Right? It's quite a practice. There are a large number of yogis scattered throughout India, Tibet, and other countries who undoubtedly possess supernormal powers and faculties, but who are not distinguishable from the ordinary man of the world by any special moral or spiritual traits of character. Some of these men are good people, self-centered or vain, but harmless. Others of another class cannot be considered innocent and harmless. They are prone to take part in questionable activities and under provocation can cause injury to those who cross their path. Wow. There is a third class of yogis who definitely tread the left-hand path and are called brothers of the shadow. They have powers of various kinds developed to a high degree, and unscrupulous and dangerous, though outwardly they may adopt a mode of life which makes them appear religious. Well, we see that playing out all the time, don't we? But anyone in whom intuition is developed can spot these people and distinguish them from the followers of the right-hand path by their tendency to cruelty, unscrupulousness, and conceit. All right? And we're all playing this out to a certain degree. The fact that we can conceive of, and perceive that something like this could be possible, right? And as we move closer, it's like, whoa, 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 we all have to stop conceiving of that. That is no longer possible. That's no longer a path that we can take, right? We don't want it to exist in our reality. We keep projecting it outward and having these experiences and seeing them play out, right? In physical reality. So when do we get to the point where we start to really discern, like, whoa, no, that's not possible anymore. It's not inevitable anymore. It doesn't exist in my reality anymore. That's how we really shift up to the next level, all right? The higher yoga, which is expounded in the Yoga Sutras, should be distinguished very carefully from the lower yoga referred to above. It has for its objective not the development of powers which can be used for self-aggrandizement or satisfaction of conceit, but enlightenment and consequent freedom from the illusions and limitations of the lower life. We're completely removing all that stuff, completely removing it. We no longer spend time down there in that realm where that kind of stuff happens. It doesn't exist anymore, right? We've developed our mind, we've disciplined ourselves, and we've gone through the process of understanding all that stuff and no longer identifying with it, right? Since in gaining this enlightenment, the sadhaka has to undergo certain physical and mental disciplines which are the same as those adopted by the followers of the left-hand path. The two paths seem to run parallel for some distance, but the time comes at an early stage when the paths begin to diverge rapidly. One leads to an ever-increasing concentration of power in the individual and his isolation from the one life. The other to the progressive merging of the individual consciousness in the one consciousness and freedom from bondage and illusion. One leads to an ever-increasing concentration of power in the individual and his increasing, I added that word increasing, isolation from the one life, right? We're moving further and further away from one consciousness. The other to the progressive merging of the individual consciousness in the one consciousness and freedom from bondage and illusion. The hope of the former is naturally very limited and confined to the realm of the intellect, while there is no limit to the achievement of the yogi on the other. So wonderful. Oh, this one's long. Let's see where it... This might be just one video. We have a lot to go through. Because there's a lot there, right? On the path of higher yoga, morality of a high order is essential, and it is a morality not of the conventional type, not even of ordinary religious type. It is a transcendent morality based on the higher laws of nature and organized with a view to bring about the liberation of the individual from the bonds of illusion and ignorance. So we're really going into illusion and ignorance, okay, in a very intense way. And we're learning viveka vairagya. We're discriminating and discerning. Whoa, where is that line? It becomes so subtle, right? And then we're detaching from it. Its object is not to achieve limited happiness within the illusions of the lower life, but to gain true and lasting happiness or peace by transcending those illusions. This is a point which must be clearly understood because to many students of yogic philosophy, yogic morality appears to be unnecessarily harsh and forbidding. They cannot understand why it should not be possible to practice a morality which will allow us to have reasonable enjoyments of the worldly life as well as the peace and knowledge of the higher, the best of both worlds, as we say. Yeah. According to some, Brahmacharya should be compatible with moderate sexual indulgence. Ahimsa should allow one to defend oneself against attacks from others. Such compromises with the demands of yogic morality seem quite reasonable from the worldly standpoint, but anyone who studies the philosophy of yoga carefully will see the utter futility of trying to keep a hold on this world while trying to conquer the great illusion. It all has to be let go, ultimately, on some level. Not that it is not possible to practice yoga at all without giving up these things entirely, but the progress of the sadhaka is bound to stop at one stage or another if he tries to make these compromises. We're moving beyond compromise, right? Another important point to understand with regard to yogic morality is that the virtues which are prescribed have a much wider scope and deeper significance than what appears on the surface. So let's go there. Each virtue included in Yama, for example, is a typical representative of a class of virtues which have to be practiced to a high degree of perfection. The injunction against killing, stealing, lying, etc. under Yama does not seem to represent a very high standard of morality, even from ordinary standards. Any decent and good individual is expected to abstain from such antisocial conduct. Where is then the high standard of morality which is demanded by higher yoga? In order to remove this doubt, it is necessary to remember, as has been pointed out above, that each virtue is more comprehensive in its meaning than what it is generally considered to be. Right? So our ordinary consideration and understanding of these virtues doesn't go there, right? It's way more comprehensive than we currently can imagine or have become accustomed to imagining. Thus, ahimsa does not mean merely abstaining from murder, but not willfully inflicting any injury, suffering, or pain on any living creature by word, thought, or action. So we're looking to remove completely the possibility that we can even consider those things as something that might exist in reality, right? Getting really clear about when we're crossing that line. Ahimsa thus stands for the highest degree of harmlessness, which is found only among saints and sages, and any ordinary person trying to practice it seriously in his life will soon begin to feel that perfect harmlessness is an unrealizable idea. Because it's so pervasive. We're so convinced of it. Everywhere you go, you're encountering it. It's like, oh my God. Whew. The same holds true in the case of the other virtues comprised in Yama. To what degree of perfection these virtues can be developed is shown in the 11 sutras, 35 through 45 in this section. And we're at 30, so it'll be 35 to 45, so we'll get there in another video. It should thus be clear that the morality enjoined in Yama Niyama, though apparently simple, represents a very drastic ethical code and is designed to serve as a sufficiently strong foundation for the life of higher yoga. It does not deal with the superficial aberrations and failings of human nature, nor is its purpose to make a good social law-abiding individual. It goes to the very bedrock of human nature and lays the foundation of the yogic life there, so that it may be able to bear the enormous weight of the skyscraper which yogic life really is. The main object of this relentless ethical code is to eliminate completely all mental and emotional disturbances which characterize the life of an ordinary human being. Becoming extraordinary. Anyone who is familiar with the workings of the human mind should not find it difficult to understand that no freedom from emotional and mental disturbances is possible until the tendencies dealt with under Yama Niyama have been rooted out or at least mastered to a sufficient degree. Hatred, dishonesty, deception, sensuality, possessiveness are some of the common and ingrained vices of the human race. And as long as a human being is subject to these vices in their crude or subtle forms, so long will his mind remain a prey to violent or hardly perceptible emotional disturbances, which have their ultimate source in these vices. And as long as these disturbances continue to affect the mind, it is useless to undertake the more systematic and advanced practice of yoga. Well, I hope a lot of people don't drop out after that, right? But it's just trying to, just drive the point home, right? At some point you'll get there where it's like, wow, I just can't do this anymore, right? And I'm seeing how I'm still doing it, even though I thought I wasn't anymore. Like the ego wants to claim, I wasn't doing that anymore, but whoa, now I'm starting to see like I am actually still doing that on the subtle levels, right? And I haven't seen that before. But as your awareness, as your consciousness of the veils that you're perceiving through at the different levels becomes more refined, like, whoa, I'm still doing that, even on the just subtlest level. Has to be rooted out. You're discriminating, right? You're making those distinctions, and then you're withdrawing. Whew. After this general consideration of Yama and Yama, let us discuss briefly the significance of the 5 moral qualities given in this sutra under Yama, since this is a matter which is of the greatest importance to the beginner. It may be discussed in some detail. Big detail. Ahimsa. Ahimsa really denotes an attitude and mode of behavior toward all living creatures based on the recognition of the underlying unity of life. As yogic philosophy is based on the doctrine of the one life, it is easy to see why our outer behavior should be made to conform to this all-embracing law of life. If we understand this principle thoroughly, the application of the ideal in our life will become much easier. We're so addicted to seeing everything as separate, right, and dual, right? So we're always perceiving through contrast. And it's saying, whoop, what happens if you start meditating regularly and entering that perception of unity? What did I hear this morning? Union is sacred. Yeah? Perceiving the one life. That's a sacred experience. There are many people who, without making any earnest effort to practice ahimsa, start raising imaginary problems and enter into academic discussions as to what ahimsa really is and how far it is practicable in life. This is essentially a wrong approach to the problem, because no hard and fast rules can be laid down in this as in other matters related to our conduct. Each situation in life is unique and requires a fresh and vital approach. What is right under a particular set of circumstances cannot be determined in a mechanical fashion by weighing all the facts and striking a balance. The correct insight into right action under every set of circumstances is the result of a developed and purified buddhi, right? Or discriminative faculty. And this function of buddhi, higher intellect, right? Unhindered by the complexes in our mind, it's not being influenced by the patterns and habits, right? Is possible only after prolonged training in doing the right thing at all costs. To train yourself. It is only by doing the right that we get added strength to do right in the future, and also acquire the capacity to see what is right. There is no other way. So the sadhaka who wishes to perfect himself in the practice of ahimsa leaves all academic considerations aside, keeps a strict watch over his mind, emotions, words, and actions, and starts regulating them in accordance with the ideal. Okay? Discipline. Mental discipline. Right? There is no other way. So the sadhaka who wishes to perfect himself in the practice of ahimsa leaves all academic considerations aside and keeps a strict watch over his mind, emotions, words, and actions, and starts regulating them in accordance with his ideal. Slowly, as he succeeds in putting his ideal into practice, the cruelties and injustices involved in his thoughts, actions, and words will gradually reveal themselves. His vision will clear up, and the right course of conduct under every set of circumstances will become known intuitively. And gradually, this seemingly negative ideal of harmlessness will transform itself into the positive and dynamic life of love, both in its aspect of tender compassion toward all living creatures and its practical form, which is service. Satya, the second moral quality denoted by the word Satya, has also to be taken in a far more comprehensive sense than mere truthfulness. It means strict avoidance of all exaggerations equivocation, pretense, and similar faults which are involved in saying or doing things which are not in strict accordance with what we know as true. So the veils create a kind of plastic reality or a perception of untruth, right? So we're divorced from the truth the more veils we're perceiving through, right? As we get into grosser and grosser vehicles or bodies, we are more and more veiled from that true nature, the true understanding of the truth, an ability to act and express through truth, right? It affects both our thoughts and our actions, right? Downright lying is considered bad in civilized society, but there are many variants of untruthfulness in speech and action which are not regarded as reprehensible in our conventional life. But all these must be completely eliminated from the life of the sadhaka. Why is truthfulness essential for the yogic life? Firstly, because untruthfulness in all its various forms creates all kinds of unnecessary complications in our lives, and so is a constant source of disturbance to the mind. Right? I feel like I want to let me take a drink of something. We're constantly subjected to the mental thought streams, and we're constantly getting sucked up into them, right? It's a constant source of disturbance. Right. Why is truthfulness essential for the yogic life? Firstly, because untruthfulness in all its various forms creates all kinds of unnecessary complications in our life, and so is a constant source of disturbance to the mind. To the foolish man whose intuition has become clouded, lying is one of the simplest and easiest means of getting out of an undesirable situation or difficulty. He is unable to see that in avoiding one difficulty in this manner, he creates many others of a more serious nature. Like, we understand how lies or untruths start to create webs, right? Anyone who decides to keep a watchful eye on his thoughts and actions will notice that usually one lie requires a number of other lies for its support, and in spite of all his efforts, in most cases, circumstances take such an unexpected turn that the lie is exposed sooner or later. This effort to keep up falsehoods and false appearances causes a particular strain in our subconscious mind and provides a congenial soil for all kinds of emotional disturbances. Of course, these things are not noticed by the ordinary man living a life of conventional falsehoods. It is only when he begins to practice truthfulness that the subtler forms of untruthfulness begin to reveal themselves to his eye. It is a law of nature that we become aware of the subtler forms of any vice when we have eliminated its grosser forms. Apart from the considerations given above, truthfulness has to be practiced by the sadhaka because it is absolutely necessary for the unfoldment of buddhi or intuition. The yogi has to face many problems, the solution of which cannot be found either in reference books or conclusions based on correct thinking. The only means at his disposal to solve such problems is an unclouded or pure buddhi or intuition. Now, there is nothing which clouds the intuition and practically stops its functioning in this manner as untruthfulness in all its forms. A person who starts practicing yoga without first acquiring the virtue of utter truthfulness is like a man going for exploration in a jungle at night without any light. You're bound to get lost. He has nothing to guide him in his difficulties, and the illusions created by the brothers of the shadow are sure to lead him astray. That is why the yogi must first put on the armor of perfect truthfulness in thought, word, and deed, for no illusions can pierce such an armor. You have to learn how to see the truth in all situations, and it's a practice that you have to develop over time, right? Leaving these utilitarian considerations aside, the absolute necessity of leading a perfectly straightforward life for the yogi follows from the very nature of the reality upon which the universe and our life are based. This reality in its essential nature is love and truth, and expresses itself through the great fundamental laws of love and truth, which ultimately conquer everything. Love and truth conquers everything. The outer and inner life of the yogi who is seeking this reality must therefore conform strictly to these basic laws of nature, and if his efforts are to be crowned with success. Anything which is against the law of love puts us out of harmony with this law, and we are pulled back sooner or later at the cost of much suffering to ourselves. That is why ahiṃsā is enjoined. Similarly, untruthfulness in any form puts us out of harmony with the fundamental law of truth. It creates a kind of mental and emotional strain which prevents us from harmonizing and tranquilizing our mind. So if the goal of Kaivalya, right, how you get there, is to tranquilize the mind, right, is to perceive and perceive accurately and detach from the mind. We do that, and we go through that in stages to get there. So these are one of the most important practices, right? Nonviolence and truthfulness. Not putting yourself in opposition to and perceiving things as they really are in truth, right? Not projecting falsehoods on them. Okay. Asteya literally means abstaining from stealing. Here also we have to take the word in a very comprehensive sense and not merely interpret it in terms of the penal code. Few people who have developed some moral sense will go to the length of actually stealing, but there are very few who can be considered quite guiltless from the strictly moral point of view. This is so because many indirect and subtle forms of misappropriation are connived at in our conventional life, and our rather insensitive conscience does not feel appreciably disturbed when we take part in these shady transactions. The so-called civilized man will not allow himself to put a silver spoon in his pocket when he goes out to a public dinner, but his conscience may not prick him adequately when he gives or receives gratification for doing his duty. So giving or receive gratification for doing your duty is a misappropriation of agency, right? You're seeing yourself as a separate thing doing a thing. Right? It gets really, really subtle. Stop seeing yourself as a separate thing doing the thing. That's encased in duality thinking. If you're one, there's no other to be doing or one or other to be perceiving that something is being done, right? Asteya should really not be interpreted as abstaining from stealing, but abstaining from misappropriation of all kinds. You're attaching yourself to the doer, right? The would-be yogi cannot allow himself to take anything which does not properly belong to him, not only in the way of money or goods, but even such intangible and yet highly prized things as credit for things he has not done, or privileges which do not properly belong to him. It is only when a person succeeds in eliminating to a certain extent this tendency toward misappropriation in its cruder forms that he begins to discover the subtler forms of dishonesty which are woven in our lives, of which we are hardly conscious. Right? Quite often we don't take it that far. The aspirant who intends to tread the path of higher yoga has to proceed systematically in the gradual elimination of these undesirable tendencies until their last traces have been removed and the mind rendered pure and in consequence tranquil. You should practice these prescribed virtues as a fine art, aiming at greater and greater refinement in the application of the moral principles to the problems of his daily life. Brahmacharya. Of all the virtues enjoined in Yama Niyama, this appears to be the most forbidding, and many earnest students who are deeply interested in yogic philosophy fight shy of its practical application in their life because they are afraid they will have to give up the pleasure of sex indulgence. Many Western writers have tried to solve the problem by suggesting a liberal interpretation of Brahmacharya and taking it to mean not complete abstinence, but regulated, moderate indulgence within lawful wedlock. The Eastern student who is more familiar with the traditions and actual conditions of yogic practice does not make this mistake. He knows that the real yogic life cannot be combined with the self-indulgence and waste of vital force, which is involved in the pleasures of sex life, and he has to choose between the two. He may not be required to give up sex life all at once, but he has to give it up completely before he can start the serious practice of higher yoga, as distinguished from mere theoretical study or even yogic practices of a preparatory nature. Controversial? To the serious and advanced student, this desire to combine the enjoyments of the worldly life with the peace and transcendent knowledge of the higher life seems rather pathetic and shows the absence of a true sense of values with regard to the realities of the yogic life, and therefore unfitness for leading this life. A lot of people give up after hearing it. They're like, I'm not doing that. There's no way. Those who can equate or even consider comparable sensuous enjoyments with the peace and bliss of the higher life for which the yogi strives, and can consequently hesitate in giving up the former, have yet to develop the strong intuition which tells them unequivocally that they have to sacrifice a mere shadow for the real thing, a passing sensation for life's greatest gifts. So the pleasure, the sensuous pleasure of attaining those higher states is incomparable to the pleasure we're so attached to in these lower realms. Yeah. Let the student who feels hesitation in giving up such enjoyments of the senses or seeks a compromise honestly ask himself whether he believes that a person who is a slave of his passions is really fit to embark on this divine adventure, and the answer that he will get from within will be clear and unequivocal. So, and then we're going back to, it's beyond the mind. We can't conceive of it right now. We just have to trust on some level and let go that it is way more pleasurable than we can ever imagine. It's beyond the beyond. So this is the first thing which must be clearly understood with regard to Brahmacharya. The practice of higher yoga requires complete abstinence from sex life, and no compromise on this point is possible. Of course, there are many angas of yoga which the would-be yogi can practice to some extent by the way of preparation. But he must definitely and systematically prepare to give up completely not only physical indulgence, but even thoughts and emotions connected with the pleasures of sex. The second point to note in this connection is that Brahmacharya, in its wider sense, stands not only for abstinence from sexual indulgence, but freedom from craving for all kinds of sensuous enjoyments. The pursuit of sensual pleasures is so much a part of our life, and we depend to such an extent on these for our happiness, that it is considered quite natural and blameless for anyone to indulge in these enjoyments within the limits of moderation and social obligations. The use of scents, indulgence in the pleasures of the palate, wearing furs, and similar pleasures of the senses are so common that no blame attaches to the pursuit of such enjoyments, even where they involve terrible suffering to countless living creatures. So do you really like your cashmere sweaters, right? How is the cashmere harvested, right? Do we really enjoy different cosmetics that are being tested on animals, right? Are we attached to those? Can we distinguish, like, well, I'm just not going to participate in that anymore? We should pull all our energy out of that stuff, and it dries up, right? If there's no market for it, right? Just pull all our energy out of that stuff. We're no longer participating in it. It is all taken as a matter of course, and very few people ever give even a passing thought to these things. And for the man who is leading the ordinary life in the world, moderate enjoyments of a kind which do not involve any suffering to other creatures do not really matter. They are a part of the normal life at this stage of evolution. But for the would-be yogi, these seemingly innocent enjoyments are harmful, not because there is anything sinful about them, but because they carry with them a potentiality for constant mental and emotional disturbances. No one who allows himself to be attracted by the objects of the senses can hope to be free from the worries and anxieties which characterize the life of the worldly man. I wrote up here on top, ice cream / coffee. That must be mine. Man. Besides being a source of constant mental disturbance, the pursuit of sensual enjoyments tends to undermine the will and to keep up an attitude of mind which militates against a wholehearted pursuit of a yogic ideal. It is, however, militates, what an interesting word. It is, however, necessary to understand what is really to be aimed at in giving up sensual enjoyments. As long as we are living in the world and moving among all kinds of objects, which affect the sense organs. We cannot avoid feeling sensuous pleasures of various kinds. It's part of being in the human body, right? Can't help it. When we eat tasty food, we cannot help feeling a certain amount of sensuous pleasure. It is the natural result of the food coming in contact with the taste buds and arousing particular sensations. Has the yogi then to attempt the impossible task of shutting out all pleasurable sensations? No, not at all. The trouble lies not in feeling the sensation, which is quite natural and in itself harmless, but in the craving for the repetition of the experiences which involve pleasurable sensations. So we get addicted to it, right? Become attached to it. It is that which has to be guarded against and rooted out, because it is the desire, kama, which disturbs the mind and creates samskaras, and not the actual sensation. So it's not about being in a body and experiencing the natural flow of what being in a body means, right? It's the desire for repetition. It's the attachment, right? And then we keep spinning out. Like we're identifying with the feeling and we're craving it, right? And it causes disturbance in the mind because we're constantly looking for ways to satisfy that craving, right? Okay. Yogi moves among all kinds of objects as anybody else, but his mind is not attached to objects which give pleasure or repelled from objects which give pain, attachment and aversion, right? He is therefore unaffected by the presence or absence of different kinds of objects. The contact with an object produces a particular sensation, but the matter ends there. So we have the experience, but we're not projecting all sorts of stuff onto it, right? And we're not attaching to it. But this condition of non-attachment can be attained only after a very prolonged and severe self-discipline and renunciation of all kinds of objects which give pleasure. Though in the case of some exceptional sadhakas who bring powerful samskaras from past lives, it comes naturally and easily. So depending upon how burdened you are by the impressions from the past, it'll be easier or not easier for you, and you're going to go through different phases in your life where you're like, wow, I'm really attached to a lot of sensual things here, and I get to kind of indulge in that and learn the lessons associated with that, and then you pass into other phases where you're like, wow, I'm not really attached to anything, right? So you get to experience both, and you go back and forth to different degrees until you reach the highest realms, right? There are some people who allow themselves to remain under the self-deception that they are unattached to enjoyments of the senses, even though they continue outwardly to indulge in them. You're attached to the illusions of the lower life, right? And you don't even realize it, right? It will help these people to destroy this self-deception if they ask themselves seriously why they continue to indulge in those pleasures if they have really outgrown them. The fact is that, for the ordinary sadhaka, it is only by renouncing pleasures of the senses that indifference toward them can be developed and tested. So I put ice cream and coffee up there. I started to brew my coffee with half cacao and half coffee. So maybe I'll be shifting over to cacao. But then that'll become something it'll just become another attachment, right? Ice cream. I don't want to talk about ice cream right now. Where am I? Austerity is thus a necessary part of the yogic discipline. Those who allow themselves to lead the soft life of sensual pleasures under the illusion that these things do not touch them are merely postponing the effort for the earnest pursuit of the yogic ideal. To the worldly minded, this austerity appears forbidding, if not meaningless, and they frequently wonder what the yogi really lives for. But to the yogi, this freedom from attachment brings an undefinable peace of mind and inner strength, beside which the enjoyments of the senses appear intolerable, right? So you're going to go through a process where you're just like, wow, I'm so conscious of the pain that this is causing me and the disturbance that it's causing in my mind. I can't bring myself to continue to engage in it, right? It's just not worth it. It's holding me back. Aparigraha. Aparigraha is sometimes translated as absence of greediness, but non-possessiveness perhaps gives the underlying ideal better. In order to understand why it is essential for the would-be yogi to eliminate this tendency in his life, we have only to consider the tremendous bias which it gives to our life. The tendency to accumulate worldly goods is so strong that it may be considered almost a basic instinct in human life. Of course, as long as we live in the physical world, we have to have a few things which are essential for the maintenance of the body, although essential and non-essential are relative terms. And there seems to be no limit to the cutting down of even what are considered the necessities of life. Minimalism has become really popular lately, hasn't it? What are the actual necessities of life? How much stuff do you need to accumulate, right? But we are not satisfied with the necessities of life. We must have things which may be classified as luxuries. These are not necessary for keeping body and soul together, but are meant to increase our comforts and enjoyments. Now we're moving into sensual, right? These things all kind of interconnect with each other. We do not, however, stop even at luxuries. When we have at our disposal all the means that can ensure all possible comforts and enjoyments for the rest of our things. We do not, however, stop even at luxuries. When we have at our disposal all the means that can ensure all possible comforts and enjoyments for the rest of our things, for the rest of our life, we are still not satisfied and continue to amass wealth and things. We're constantly like, I want that. I can't live without that. I'm going to do this. I have to have this. Oh my God. One would think that a palace would suffice for the real needs of a human being, but one who has a palace is not satisfied and wants to build a few more. Of course, these extra things do not serve any purpose except that of satisfying our childish vanity and desire to appear superior to our fellow man. Ooh, there's a lot there. There is no limit to our desire for wealth and the material things which we like to have around us, and obviously, therefore, we are dealing here with an instinct which has no relation with reason or common sense. Apart from the complications which the human instinct causes in the world in the social and economic fields, which we need not discuss here, its effect on the life of the individual is of a nature which makes its elimination for the would-be yogi an absolute necessity. Let us consider a few of the factors which are involved. There's a fire alarm going off. I don't think I have a fire alarm. My house is next door, so hopefully it goes off soon. I don't think that I had anything on that would cause a fire. Oh, they stopped it. Okay. Let us consider a few of the factors which are involved. First, you have to spend time and energy in the accumulation of things which you do not really need. Then you have to spend time and energy in maintaining and guarding the things which you have accumulated. The worries and anxieties of life increasing proportionately with the increase in the accumulations. You have to accommodate everything and maintain, right? Then consider the constant fear of losing the things, the pain and anguish of actually losing some of them every now and then, and the regret of leaving them behind when you ultimately bid goodbye to the world. Now, add up all these things and see what a colossal waste of time, energy, and mental force all this involves. No one who is at all serious about the solution of the deeper problems of life can afford to squander his limited resources in this manner. So the would-be yogi cuts down his possessions and requirements to the minimum and eliminates from his life all those unnecessary accumulations and activities which fritter away his energies and are a source of constant disturbance to the mind. He remains satisfied with what comes to him in the natural course of the working of the law of karma. It may be pointed out, however, that it is really not the quantity of things by which we are surrounded, but our attitude toward them which really matters. For there may be only a few things in our possession, and yet the instinct of possessiveness may be very strong. On the other hand, we may be roiling in wealth, and yet be free from any sense of possession. Many interesting stories are told in the Hindu scriptures to illustrate this point. The story of Janaka, who lived in a palace, and the hermit, who lived in a hut, being well known. It is possible to live in the most luxurious circumstances with no feeling of possession and readiness to part with everything without the slightest hesitation. But, though this is possible, it is not easy, and the would-be yogi would do well to cut out all unnecessary things, for it is only in this way he can learn to live the simple and austere life. Even if he is not attached to his possessions, he will have to spend time and energy in maintaining the paraphernalia, and this he cannot afford to do. But it must be clearly understood that the necessity for cultivating this virtue lies chiefly in ensuring a state of mind which is free from attachments. The additional advantages which have been referred to above, though important, are of a subsidiary nature. That was a lot, right? So we're going to stop for there. I'll read the next one, but I'll extrapolate or the commentary on it in the next video, okay? So 31. These, the 5 vows, not conditioned by class, place, time, or occasion, and extended to all stages, constitute the great vow. And we'll read that one next. Whew, that was a lot. We're really getting into some nitty-gritty here. It's pretty intense. Thank you for joining me today.